Hey, gang, I've been out of this thing for a bit due to a little personal tragedy, but I thought a fun distraction might be a little look forward. I wanted to do this a couple weeks ago, but, well, here we are. Really, just looking at the calendar, we're about a month and a half away from CitCon 2025, which means we're most of the way through 2025. Wow. I do not like how time works. Anyways, with Sitcon right around the corner, this is a good time to throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Just kind of a fun prediction chain. Sound good? Let's get it. So, just as a bit of a refresher, we've gotten a little spoiled the last couple years thanks to in-person sitcoms appearing back on the menu. But prior to that, during the height of the Wait, is YouTube still hiding vids who use certain keywords? Okay, fine. During the times that we shall not speak of that occurred from 2020 to 2023 ish, we had online sitcoms. Well, we had one. This one was a bit muted and a bit shorter, and obviously had a lot less fanfare. Let's go ahead and look at it because it has some clues for what we could expect to see this year, and fortunately or unfortunately, may point towards a few things that I'll get to later in this vid. While it's not a perfect one-to-one because of the aforementioned world-spanning events of the early 2020s and the fact that all of CIG was working remotely, it's still a good example of the coming sitcom and what it could be like. But hopefully it's a bit more prophetic than 2022's sitcom. Let me explain. So in 2022, we got a bunch of shorts that almost felt like Around the Verse episodes. For those of you who weren't involved in this weirdness back then, Around the Verse is what Inside Star Citizen used to be, but they were typically much longer and much more in depth, particularly more in depth than what we've gotten this year. Anyways, what we got was a big focus on the road to 4.0 and all the cool stuff that was going to drop with 4.0, which I remind you, we were on that road for a long while. No real reason to bash CIG on that. Static server meshing for a game this complex was a tough nut to crack. Thankfully, CIG was able to nut on it. Everything in this time was either 4.0 or Pyro. In this 30-minute show was no exception. Then we got a 10-minute long talk on the investigation missions. These sounded really cool, but these were put on ice, likely in favor of the open activity zones, basically always on dungeon dives that they're going with for this year. Still, some of the things they were talking about sounded pretty cool, so I'm hoping they come back to it sooner than later. Then we got a 20-minute talk on the new underground, which would turn out to be the big distribution centers that we've got in game now. Unfortunately, we're still waiting on some of the features from this talk, where the deeper levels were supposed to be much more involved. All the missions around the things were supposed to be more involved, but right now they're just kind of bigger bunkers, and that's it. One day, hopefully we get to see some of these ideas pulled into reality. They seemed pretty far along when they showed it to us. The need for multiple speeds was about 17 minutes long and was all about master modes, which, as you probably know, are now getting dumped. So, I don't know. I wouldn't really call it wasted time, but I kind of like master modes. But with Squadron 42 knocking at the door, they better pick one of these options and go with it. Lorville Redo was up next and was surprisingly only about 9 minutes long. Really, the remake on Lorville was incredible, although I think they missed an opportunity to slap in some extra neighborhoods and areas of interest. As it was, the city skyline got a facelift and that was about it. That said, it was a really nice facelift. But still, would have been nice to get indentured servant hovels, deep industrial zones, shady criminal areas, that sort of thing. Maybe one day. Power Play was 17 minutes long and talked about the resource management system, which should be huge when we eventually get engineering. And yeah, I'll get to that one in a bit. As it is, It looked like a pretty well thought out system, but here we are 3 years later with nothing really to show for it. This should also play pretty large in base building, I'd think. Talking Ship was a little over 18 minutes long, and these tend to kind of be the centerpiece of sitcoms, even no matter how long they run. And they talked about the C1 Spirit, which was the concept for that year, the Corsair, which I think actually dropped at that sitcon in 2022. And I mean, the Corsair was my daily driver for a while, so yeah, they did a pretty good job with the Corsair. I still see them around on the regular, especially after the pilot got all their guns back. Then they talked about the Steve, which I think was straight to drivable. Basically, it was the LTI token for that year, but not a bad little buggy to drive around in. I mean, I still have mine, even though I haven't pulled it that often. Don't make that dirty. Then they let us pick a ship, but of course they ended up making most of those options anyways. Outlaw Lifestyle. This one's listed as a sitcom show from 2022, but if memory serves, it was just filler between two of the real episodes. It only ran 3 minutes, so it was really just an ad for Pyro. And they had a couple quick shout outs to the community, and that was it. All told, I think it was around 5 hours. As you can see, some things actually made it in over the years, like Pyro, although they took longer than anyone, including CIG, thought. Other things got scrapped or put on ice, and this became very clear in 2023 and especially 2024 as Squadron 42 ramped up and sucked all of the oxygen out of the room. Probably rightly so. So let's do a much shorter review of what they said last year during the in-person CitizenCon. Really, the focus of last year's CitCon seemed to center on base building and bigger picture plans of where they wanted to go now that server meshing was working. The theme for the last few years have been things that were shown off at CitCon were going to be what they try to crowbar into the next year. But that didn't last long as they shifted gears almost immediately into focusing on stability rather than content, what they did during 2025. To their credit, though, they at least warned us like a week after CitCon. Granted, the glow of CitCon was still there when they said that. I don't think a lot of us really understood what they meant. But really, if you look at the 2024 CitCon as kind of a big reset after the drop of server meshing and Pyro, it kind of makes more sense. It was kind of the 1,000-foot view of what CIG wanted to focus on next as they ramped up to the real release. If you watched last year's CitCon as kind of a 5-year plan, there wasn't much to be disappointed at. However, if you watched it as kind of a preview of what we were getting this year, well, yeah, things turned out a little differently. And that is a pretty good segue into this. Even with the constant rapid fire patch drops, most of them have been at least partially broken on release. That said, CIG's worked pretty hard to get it all stable. right before dropping the next broken patch on us. That's probably a little harsh. I've definitely had fun with some of the events, but the rapid fire pace does seem a bit unfocused. They're rolling out new events so quickly and new patches so quickly, they're just kind of blurring together. I still have only fired that big laser once, the Hathor mining laser, but I plan on fixing that this Friday, so keep an eye out for Carnival's Friday Fly Day, I guess. Enough plugging. When we were watching CitCon, it sure seemed like CIG was angling to get us at least 2 major loops this year, or maybe 3, depending on how you count it. Engineering and base building, and crafting if you separate crafting out from base building, which I do. At a guess, server meshing and getting it stabilized, along with the focus of getting Squadron 42 gold ready, just ate up too much time. And yeah, there was a lot of tech debt and code rot in the game. So it makes sense that turning the corner on static server meshing, now's as good a time as any to go through and start tightening up those screws a little. Of course, they're still making the game and there's a really long way to go, so it may be a little premature. But I'm thinking they don't want a lot of aging, game-breaking problems when they finally implement dynamic server meshing, or engineering for that matter. So unfortunately, We'll still have to wait for that loop or base building or crafting. Maybe next year. Maybe. But even during years where we weren't getting much new stuff to play with, and I mean loops and the like, we'd still be getting a good bit of info in the weekly shows that our sub money pays for. But that hasn't been the case this year for some reason. Taking this week as an example, and unfortunately an all too common example, we have zero video content, no Inside Star Citizen, no Star Citizen Live. Again, we've had 30 weeks this year as of the recording of this vid, and we've had 44 vids, so not bad, right? But of those, 17 were basically just ads or fluff for ships that they were dropping in those patches. So you take those out and that leaves 27 vids. Of those, 9 were basically just patch release overviews, so we're down to 18. 18 vids with actual game development info, or at least the kind of info we used to get, and it's not looking too great. And the hard thing is that there really doesn't seem to be a good reason for it. In 30 weeks, that's barely a single show every other week, much less 2 a week. Since the sub money is specifically supposed to be going to creating these shows, I know there's several friends and org mates of mine that have stopped subbing this year thanks to that lack of info and the lack of shows. Oh, and I could take a guess that with all the devs keeping their heads down trying to bust out these patches along with Squadron 42, it just means there's not a lot of devs with time to feed info to Jared and the media team. That said, it still feels like they could have found a way. Let's get into ships and predictions, because it does seem like there's a few missing from the side scroll that they showed in 2024. That said, John Crew did say that these were the ships they would be working on, not necessarily delivering. That said, with there being a patch a month, and each patch has come with a new vehicle, weirdly, a number of those weren't really on the radar. The Meteor, the Prowler Utility, the Asgard, the Golem, the Atlas, and the Atlas Geo, none of those were on that side scroll. And a few of the ships, those that we can guess focused on base building, have been glaringly absent. As for what's left, well, what the hell? Let's go ahead and take a look at this side scroll. This is the CSV builder thing. We never got it. It's likely on ice. The MTC, we got it. Something on the Atlas chassis, likely a base builder, likely on ice. The Hornet Mark II variants, we got both of those. The Terrapin Medic, we got that. Guardian MX, we got that. The Misk Fortune, which is still my favorite name in the game, we got it. Whatever this thing is, still no idea. Bargesque, though. Probably base building adjacent, if I had to guess, but probably on ice. The Drake Snail, still haven't seen this one. Maybe a Drake builder, because I think we would have heard something about it by now. The Apollo, I would guess the big holdup on this one is more drones than medical play, but it's pretty far along in development. It sure looks like we're going to be getting it this year. And I'll say that the chassis itself is such a good design and size, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see other variants like Explorer or Combat or anything like that roll out, even in concept, when the Apollo drops. I still say we probably get it at IAE. Will we get drones? Well, I don't want to bury the lead too much, but we'll get to that in a bit. The Starlancer BLD, we didn't get this one, but we did get the TAC. Again, it was pretty clear they had a focus on construction when they were building up all the shows for CitCon, but then they tossed that idea in favor of stability. The Perseus, which is pretty far along, not sure if we'll get it for CitCon or IAE, but I'd bet on the latter, on IAA just being the bigger ship sale event. The Ironclad, which we really haven't heard all that much about, I don't think, but it's not a really complicated ship. I think we'd see this one in whatever event the Perseus isn't in, Maybe they're having problems with the command module. I'm not sure. It is weird that we haven't heard much about it though, and I'll just leave it there. And the Pioneer, yeah, still nailing down the white box explorations on this one. So it's still a year off or so, at least. Maybe next IE if they really bang it out. I will take a quick aside here that I'm in agreement with info runners that there's probably an intermediate consolidated outland ship out there somewhere. And I'll have a link in that talk in the upper right here. And we know the Kraken has now entered production, basically on the white box side. So actually, this is a good time to just kind of go into prediction time. Sure, I think CIG will start shifting back to content. The game, despite some of the event-breaking bugs, is real stable now. I think I only had a couple 30Ks this year, and they were very much just watch a short YouTube vid, which, hey, like and subscribe to avoid 30K boredom. And it would be fine and go on as if nothing ever happened. For those of us old timers, I think we all remember how aggravating 30Ks used to be. It would be the kind of thing you get hit with a 30K, lose all of your cargo for the week, and you probably wouldn't pick up the game for a week. You'd be so frustrated. So next year, I think engineering and base building and probably crafting have to come back on the menu. So I wouldn't be surprised if they showed off some late stage concepts of how they want building to work, crafting, the new economy. I'm sure we're going to see more engineering in the PTU or on the in Arena Commander. I still think they'll start showing off resource veins, so consider them kind of underground rivers of mineable ore that you maybe need a special scanner for, that you will build actual mining nodes on with the building loop. Maybe we'll finally see that drilling style of mining that we've been seeing for the Prospector for years. And maybe, yeah, maybe that is what the Drake Snail is for. And they better name it the Drake Snail, just saying. The big hurdle will be dynamic server meshing, although I don't think that will be quite as big a hurdle as static server meshing was. That said, I'm not a coder, so maybe it'll be a lot harder. No idea. Nix. I think we'll get Nix dropped on us for CitCon. If you take last year's CitCon as a 5-year plan, and there's 5 systems, well, they need to pick up the pace. And Nix isn't a real complex system, unlike Castra and especially Terra. We'll probably get another ship side scroll, and here's my way out there prediction. I think the BMM will be on there. Not for release, no way, but at least back in production. I wouldn't be shocked if drones make an appearance. The Apollo famously has them, but it's hardly the only ship that's currently flyable in the verse that uses drones. So it's something that CIG has to tackle sooner or later. I think they'll expand a little on the growing meta story. Hopefully there'll be something on org tools, which was something else they showed off, but ended up icing for the year in favor of the stability kick. The ability to assign org ships and roles on ships is badly needed, but who knows how far off that is since they haven't even talked about it yet. I'm really hoping we get more info on building interiors. That was something they showed off a couple years back along with persistent habs. We've got persistent hangars, so it seems like habs is the next logical step. On that note, I'm hoping they'll roll out vehicle elevators and hangars so we don't have to do the weird musical chairs thing with loading up ships with vehicles like we do now. Squadron 42. I think we're close, people. I still say there's probably a target of Q1 or 2 of next year. Now, will they let us know that? I doubt it, but I would expect to hear something. I'm not too up on EU law, but I'm pretty sure there's riders on the contract they signed with those venture capitalists that was probably keyed pretty heavily to releasing Squadron 42 on a schedule. That said, I sure haven't been seeing any trailers or hype building for it. And like I've been saying for a while, for CIG, with this game being a niche within a niche within a niche like this, they'll need to get people to understand what the game is. You get a Call of Duty player jumping into a space flight simulator without realizing that that is the game they bought ahead of time, you're going to be getting some nasty reviews. And CIG absolutely has to stick the landing with Squadron 42. It has to be as near a perfect launch as possible. And I don't know, guys, that's the bulk of my predictions. What do you think? What's dropping in CitCon that I missed? What ships do you think are coming in the next, let's say, 15 months or so? Or that CIG will at least be bringing into the production pipeline? Let's hear it. And catch me next time.
Good throw. What a good boy. You like your toy?
You want to go for walkies? Walkies? Okay.